I mean, I'm an analyst. So I analyze why Paul DeYoung didn't catch that ground ball up the middle because his footwork wasn't good at the start. And so then I come home and then I'm going to analyze why our neighbor shouldn't have done that and why the pastor shouldn't have said that or why and so I feel like I have to check that. I mean, I'm not the analyst of the world and of everybody. So I think that's where I need the most, I need the most grace, I think.
My guest today is Rick Horton, a cheerful man who brings his warmth to the broadcasting booth while also being candid about Major League Baseball, which he covers. He has the ability to be candid because he was a pitcher, and he had highs, he won a World Series ring, and he had lows because of injuries. He's also been a leader in Christian organizations. I'm delighted to have Rick Horton with us today. From the Center for Faith and Work here in St. Louis, this is Working with me, your host, Dan Doriani. Here we strive to fire the imagination of Christians who long to practice their faith in the workplace. Through conversations with doctors, athletes, teachers, executives, and more, we seek to engage those who desire to do significant work, to practice love and justice in their work, and who dare to change their corner of the world through that work. All right, today I have a man that I would love to call my friend but I can't because I haven't spent enough time with you, but one of the sweetest professional people and gifted people I've ever known, Rick Horton, sometimes called Ricky Horton, but now more likely called Rick. Rick had a 7-year professional baseball career with the Cardinals and the Dodgers. He was in the playoffs more than once. He was on a World Series winning team. He had some years with fantastic ERAs. And then he got hurt, and it was a pretty serious injury. And he then moved on to his second career. And it's been a long second career. As those of you who know this podcast understand, we like to talk about moving around and finding God's will when things change a bit. And Rick's going to do that. Rick's going to talk about that because he has been a baseball player and a coach and a broadcaster, won an Emmy Award once, and maybe twice. You can tell me twice?
No,
just
once.
Just one time. All right, so he won an Emmy Award. That's still pretty good. He's very good on television, and he also has worked for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for a long time. So you could almost say he's a 4-career man and has been following the Lord's lead wherever he goes. So it's great to have you here, Rick.
Well, Dan, great to be with you. And the friend word, we've intersected several times. And one of the things I've learned in all of the professions that I've been a part of is sometimes those friendships are kind of just your ships passing in the night in a bit. But when you're connected at the heart, there is a difference. And so I feel that with you, and certainly a lot of people along the way. And it's been been really a fun journey.
Yeah, great. So let me just ask you to start a little bit with baseball for a few minutes, but not the playing part. I want to talk about announcing because a lot of times when we're in work, what we want to do is operate with ethical integrity, but also personal integrity, and they're competing forces. Yeah. So you are an announcer, and you have to announce baseball games, and you get to announce for the home team, which is great because you get to be at home more than somebody who travels nationally, right? On the other hand, you have to tell what's happening on the field in a way that's both truthful and sort of rooting for the home team. And so sometimes you have to talk about a team or a player who's not doing well in a way that's honest and yet loving and caring. So tell us about that. How do you handle it and especially if you like the person,
right? And
they're working hard and they're in a bad slump. How do you operate with Christian integrity, truth, and love in those situations?
Well, start with the like part is I've got a thing that I say is, I really like my next door neighbor, but I don't want him playing third base for the Cardinals. So, so at this point, you have to get to the professional reality of the truth of what that level of performance is. And, I will say I have a leg up by having been a player and a coach. I think the players and the coaches recognize that, he's coming from a place where he gets us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key to what your question is does the player have respect for you? So when you say, boy, that wasn't a very good route he took on that, they know I know. Mm-hmm. And they're not, and I would say that to their face. I would say that within the context of a relationship so it doesn't bother them as much. So I think relationships are still part of why how deep you can get in let's say criticism.
Yeah.
But I also I come from the idea that I have people tell me you get a lot of opinions.
Yes, I'm sure that you do.
People will say you're too much of a homer, you're not enough, you're too harsh. Everybody's got an opinion because it's entertainment. Yes. And I do get that you're a homer, and I say thank you when they say that. They don't mean it that way. I just say thank you. I mean, just turn it around a little bit because yes, I work for the Cardinals. I love the Cardinals. Have been great to me and my family, and so I want to promote Cardinal baseball in general, Cardinal baseball specifically, and the players are the game. It's not and not only the players are the game, but the ex-players, the Bob Gibsons and the Lou Brocks and the Red Schoenings. You have to have a working knowledge of them as well. So I start with that premise, but when it comes down to it, a bad play is a bad play, and there's no credibility if I try to kind of gloss over it. And so I often will. I had one encounter with a player who I made a comment about him, and his wife heard what I said, told him, and he confronted me in the clubhouse. And he said, "I heard you said this," and I said, "No, I said that." And he said, "Oh, that's okay." But he was, I mean, he was, I would say, strongly suggesting in the clubhouse that he had some words for me to a lot of people, and they warned me because he was not happy with me. And this is years ago. Yeah. But now he's my friend, and it's and he really was then too. But a lot of that stuff can be misunderstood. I would say this, Dan, if you're a broadcaster in 2020, it's a very different thing than being a broadcaster in 1980 in terms of what you can say, should say, and what you kind of have to present, and as far as your tone is concerned. So there are some challenges with it, no doubt.
Yeah, so before we started, you mentioned that there are 5 things you have to watch for, 5 filters. Maybe in the past there were 2.
Yeah.
Now there are 5. You want to tell us what the filters are?
So my personal first filter is what's glorifying to God about what I say. And that should be, I don't care whether you're talking to your neighbor out in the yard or at the local grocery store. I mean, that's number one. And that's, I mean, and it's important. And you can't kind of forget that, too, because you can get off on something else. But, secondarily, who I work for. How does this reflect the St. Louis Cardinals with what I say, or Fox Sports Midwest? Right. I understand that, but that's a little muddier. That filter is, I must say, a little undefined. There are times where they say, we want you to say whatever you want, just don't go over the line.
What the line is another question. It's left to you to decide.
And it's always my next question is, what is that line? And there's no answer to it. So that is the problem of, they want personality, they want opinions, but just be careful, kind of, generally.
The joke I heard from somebody else in the field was, when the home team's doing really badly, talk about the minor leagues a lot.
Well, and that's part of it. There is, and there's always something to talk about. Right. Honestly, radio is easier than TV because on TV you're watching the team lose 18-5 if things aren't going well. Their 4th loss in a row, and we're fixated on that as we broadcast.
It's right in front of your eyes.
And I will also say TV's harder because I have a producer, a director, and a partner that all have different ideas about where we should go.
Right.
But on radio, you can go off on the minor leagues and Bob Gibson and Lou Brock and Red Schoenings and Whitey Herzog, and it seems to be a more natural thing to do on radio than it is on TV. So one of the other filters, frankly, is what would the player feel about that? How would the player, in the context of my relationship with them? So there's a couple players on the team I'm closer to, and I feel like I can say anything about them, and that's, I mean, they're willing to, if I say, look, that's a bad play, and he's a better player than that. But it always has to be understood in the context of these are the best 750 players on the planet. Okay, these are not, and even what we would say the bad big leaguers, they're still big leaguers.
They're outstanding players.
They're still the best. Yes, and
they're freakishly good at their
there's
sport.
No question. And I think the hardest filter really, and I don't know if I'm up to 4 or 5, but one of the hardest filters is just the political correct. I was going to say my family is another filter, and really the last one would be kind of this politically correct understanding that is, everybody's sensitive to things, and so even just a mild clubhouse conversation type comment that you might say in the clubhouse amongst friends, you can't say on the air. So I have to pull the player out of me and the coach out of me and become more of a broadcaster or fan, which is not really my my main deal.
You know what they call a gaffe is telling the truth when you weren't supposed to.
Right.
And you know, one of the most frustrating things in so many jobs is that you want to tell the truth and you can't. Because if you told the truth, it would be misunderstood, it would hurt somebody. And so we have this constant tension between loving people, meeting expectations, staying out of trouble, and being honest about what's happening in front of us.
One of the things I love to go over with, and I've done it for years in the staff in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes world, just to bridge over to that for a moment.
Yeah.
One of the things I love to talk about communication, how important communication is when we have a widespread network of people who are connected to FCA, and there's students and athletes and coaches and donors, and it's worldwide and all that, is who needs to know what, when, and how. I mean, we would always talk about that. So timing of what you say is critical. And the how is critical. Is it clear, but is it not hateful and not harmful
or
and not
snarky edge
snarky
to it, or sarcastic
right?
edge,
Yeah.
Right.
So I try to go through all of those things in my head. And here's the deal with that, Dan. When you're broadcasting, you have to go through those filters instantaneously.
Yes.
You know, the first game I ever did, I did with Jack Buck. We were in Atlanta. I was doing a radio game with Jack Buck, and Don Sutton came up behind me, put his hands on my shoulders, and Don I knew from the Dodger days.
Right.
And he knew it was my first game. And I'm working with the great Jack Buck, and who, by the way, got me into this in the first place, Jack and Joe both. And so I'm getting ready to do this game, and I'm nervous about that, of course. And Don Sutton walked up, put his hands on my shoulders right before the first pitch of the game, right before we came on the air, and he said, "Look, this is not that hard. All you have to do is see something immediately that happens on the field, think of something brilliant to say about it in 7 seconds, and shut up." That's what and I said, "Oh, thanks, Don, for that advice." But we laughed about it. But there's some truth to it.
Tension.
Yeah, it did. But there's truth to it too.
Yeah. So let me ask you to see if you can do this in sort of 1 second.
Yeah.
How do you give me one sentence? You're talking to somebody who wants to be a broadcaster someday. How do you speak the truth in love, one of the core Christian ideas, in a radio setting, maybe especially if your home team's not doing real well? How do you do it? One or two sentences.
You have to have courage to do it.
Okay.
You have to be, and honesty comes along with it, and sometimes you do have to step out and say what's right, and just let the consequences fall where they may, and again, do it with love, and that's that's longer than one sentence to figure out what doing something in love means, but I think that's still the fact.
Yeah. And of course, you have the privilege of having a relationship with a lot of the players, which you can build. And as you say, being a former player yourself. And as a player, you had high years and you had low years.
I sure did. I mean, 3 times we were in the World Series, 85, 87, and 88, twice with the Cardinals and once with the Dodgers. And
you were part of one of the most painful World Series of all time.
The 85 loss, and the 87 loss was tough too to the Twins, because we thought we felt like we could have won both of those World Series and didn't. And winning it with the Dodgers, we beat the Oakland A's, and we weren't supposed to beat them. So tried not to bring that up to Tony La Russa very often when I was with him. But it is the reality of the peaks and valleys of, one of my favorite songs is Torrin Wells, Hills and Valleys, and we all experience them no matter what work you're in. You think that athletes are always kind of on this high and everything's great, but it is just flat out not true. Sometimes
you lose half the time by definition.
You lose half the time. You're injured. You're lonely. You're on the road. All kinds of things happen that's just real life stuff that people might not think about.
Yeah. So I want to go 2 directions at once, but I'll go with injured.
Okay.
So every job looks glamorous to somebody, and every job looks miserable at times, right? So the concert pianist, what a magnificent, thousands are applauding, and you have a recording contract. On the other hand, you got to practice scales for an hour, just boring scales for who knows how long every day, and then you have to practice your piece, and you're by yourself, and your fingers start to hurt, and that's true of every job known to humanity. My take is that the taking out the garbage part of being a professional athlete is the physical training, and especially the injuries.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the challenge. So this is a faith and work program.
Yeah.
And everybody has challenges. What's the challenge in this glamorous job of being a professional athlete? You
have to be driven enough that you're doing what you need to be doing when nobody's looking. And what happens at the end, the fruit of that is the game, the win, the home run. But It starts in November. Guys start working out in November at the latest, November 1st, for the next year. So there's November, December, January.
They take 2 weeks off.
They take 2 or 3 weeks off just to heal little
Yep.
things, not big
Yep.
things. Just
Yep.
my finger's sore, my ankle's a little twisted, but so you take a couple weeks off, then you start lifting, you start throwing, you start hitting. So there's a lot of pre-stuff that goes into everything that you see that ends up happening on the field, and sometimes rehab is part of that. And I would say that there's a loneliness to all of those things, and you have to embrace that a little bit. I mean, even though, so no matter what the profession, there are things that will make you better at what you do that people aren't going to see, and it's an edge. My high school baseball coach came up to me one day in a practice, and he whispered in my ear, all he said was, and he was not really a baseball guy, he was a basketball coach. He said, I don't know anything about baseball, but I'm going to help you work. Okay. And he came up during my senior year, we were playing against the best pitcher in the state and one of the top 4 players in the country, was a pitcher on a local school. And he came up to me, his name was Tim Cole, and he walked up and he said, how hard do you think Tim Cole's working right now? And he put that in my head, and I never forgot that. So,
yes.
And his point was,
you were like 17 or something.
16 probably, maybe 17. Yeah.
So you were ready for that.
I was ready for that, and I was ready to hear that if I don't have all the ability in the world, I don't throw as hard as Tim Cole, I'm not as fast, I'm not as strong, so I have to work harder than him if I want to do well, and if I want to compete. So that's gonna mean doing things when, again, nobody's looking, and that was a profound teaching for me that I think went through all kinds of other things too. You just can't just show up. I mean, you can't just show up. So, and injuries are tedious. Injuries are lonely,
and it can take 9 months or a year to get better.
And I think exactly. And I think injuries are the perfect example for this, because you can work for a month and have a 5% increase in your flexibility or whatever that thing may be. Yeah. And I think my training and going through rehab a couple of different times actually has helped me in later life and things, and even injuries I've had in later life that I embrace it. I embrace the workout, the rehab. I don't go away from it. I think, well, this is my chance to work at it, and I don't want to say I like it.
Keep your body strong.
And keep my body strong. I'm not going to say I like it.
Older, but we want to take care of our bodies.
I'm not going to just let it go.
Right. So I'm going to tell you a funny story. This is sort of a for athletes moment of this program. Mm-hmm. I've had the privilege of playing with professional athletes off their sport quite a number of times. I've played basketball with professional either football players or baseball players. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed is, and I would say a reasonably good basketball player. Yeah. I mean, nobody's that even a star, but I could play, somewhat anyway. And I played with guys who were just lights out, incredible athletes. Like, of course, he became an extraordinary professional. And I've played with guys. I played on a team with an award-winning football player who could not make a shot.
Right.
I mean, he could if it was a layup and he was all by himself under the hoop, he might put it in. He could rebound, he could intimidate, he could block shots, but the man could not shoot. And there are some people who are just great at everything, and there are other people who are great at their sport and they're lights out at their sport. Before we started, I told you I accidentally ended up playing with somebody who just walked off the tour in tennis, and it was frightening. Yeah, it was frightening, and he was taking it pretty easy on us. But in basketball, I don't mind playing against a former baseball player.
Yeah, I think it's funny. There are times where even in the baseball world, baseball looks easy for one thing. Basketball, we think I can't slam dunk, but I think I can hit that fastball.
Yeah, but the reflexes for baseball are incredible.
Easy, but it's not. And so I teasingly say, people tease me about, well, you didn't throw very hard. You threw in the mid-80s, and I could hit you. I teasingly say, and maybe it's my lower nature coming through, I say, well, grab a bat. That's what I like to say. But basketball was actually my first love. I played in high school, was decent in high school, but my talent ran out, but I learned to work. I worked harder at basketball than I did baseball. Once that was gone, then I learned to work at baseball. But the football guys, we took out several football players to Busch Stadium to have them take batting practice. And the only guys that could hit were the punters and the wide receivers.
Wide receivers, yeah.
The linemen couldn't get the ball out of the infield. I mean, it's
maybe
odd.
The cornerbacks, maybe as well.
So it is. There's it's strength, it's flexibility, it's hand-eye coordination, and so there's different kinds of things that you say. So when people say, why can't pitchers hit? one of the things I say is,
different
well,
skill set.
why can't doctors farm? I mean, it's like, they can be. I mean, yes, they're wearing the same uniform, but they could be different skill sets.
All right, so I want to go two directions again. I'm just going to say something, and that is, I used to play tennis, and I didn't get a chance to clear it, so I won't say his name, but I used to play tennis pretty often with a former baseball player, Major League Baseball player. And he would always beat me in the first set 6-1. It was just crushed.
Yes.
But then the second set, he would kind of run out of gas. And if I won the second set, which happened maybe 40% of the time, then I would crush him in the third set. And whenever I beat him, he usually won for sure. But when I would beat him, he would say, "Well, Dan, I promised myself I would never run again. And I would never try to stay in shape again." And that's why I lost you today.
So
he was a pitcher, and it was leg work, and he just said, "I'm never going to do it again."
Yeah, right.
I just don't care. And if I can't beat you in 55 minutes, I don't care.
So he had his time frame. He was ready to go to the bullpen. That's really what he was geared to be a 5-inning pitcher, apparently.
Apparently.
So, well, I still run, and that I still get my athletic stuff. I like the golf, but I love running. I do half marathons for the purpose of, I like the way I feel being fit, and I feel like the body's your temple, and not to overblow that, because the reality is it's good for me in several reasons when I actually continue to work out, and so I'm been out of playing for almost 30 years, and yet I'm of the mindset that I just don't want to kind of fall apart here. So running, golf have kind of been the things that keep me going.
Yeah, and of course, it is our instrument that God gave us, right? And just as we try to keep our mind sharp by reading good books and thinking about them, and maybe even taking notes and meditating on what we read, and our mind just keeps getting sharper and sharper, and we don't believe the last thing we read in the last book, right? I mean, the mind is kind of like a muscle in a lot of ways.
There's no doubt.
And it's a tool that God gives us, and our bodies are also tools. If we don't take care of them, we don't sleep right, we break down, we lose our energy.
So every year, and just a very personal comment, but every year in January, I go through the Purina, 4 square. I mean, that was kind of what the company was founded on, was the 4 square ways that we're developed is physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. That was really the checkerboard of your awesome Purina. So I will set goals for the year, which include reading books, and it'll include what I do physically, what I do socially, because that actually can tend to be one of the harder things for me, Dan. I'm in a very social world, but I'm talking to people, not with them. So I can easily miss out on the kind of being together with somebody, just sharing at a deeper level. So I have to kind of work at that a little bit, and of course spiritually, what does that mean? How do I flex those muscles too? So it's I do that every year. Just set goals. I wouldn't call them New Year's resolutions, but I would just say trying to create a framework where I'm gonna be able to grow in all 4 of those.
So
areas.
I love that. So I'm going to repeat it. You have every year spiritual. Physical, mental, and social goals.
Social, emotional would be the 4th.
Social or emotional. So I'm just going to tell you, the last podcast I did was with a pastor who said that for many years he hated talking to people one-on-one. And he loved preaching, and he was confessing, and he was having a challenge, just wasn't healthy, because he was a pastor of a very large church. He was constantly thinking about what he had to do next, and metaphorically looking at his watch while talking to somebody one-on-one. But of course, he was a very effective preacher, and so loved that. So a very similar point to what you're making right now.
So being present is really what that is when you're on a one-on-one situation, and you think about the effects of that within a marriage or within your relationship with your kids or your close friends. If you're not present with them, you've just become you just cut yourself off from them, and it's almost, clearly, if I'm not able to have a conversation with my wife without thinking about the 10 things I have to do next, that's just terrible for our relationship.
And yet we do that.
We do.
And that's one reason why before we started, we were told to make sure we turn off the notifications on our cell phone. And happily, we both said, those are always off.
Right.
So, and that helps you concentrate on what's in front of you.
Yeah, and so my work, in contrast to the reality of what a broadcast moment is like for me, I'm watching a game, and let's say it's on radio. We have a monitor, so I'm seeing the monitor show the game at different angles.
Okay.
I'm watching
You're
the
watching
game.
the field.
I'm watching the field. I'm watching the monitor. I have my phone. People are texting me. I have my I have my iPad open and I'm scanning several websites. I have the MLB app on.
See what's going on in other games.
Seeing what's going on in other games, and sometimes I get a thought. I'm checking Twitter, for goodness sakes.
Why are you checking Twitter?
Well, because there's occasionally, even in the midst of somebody saying I said something off, or they'll say something like, "Wow, that reminded me of a catch Jim Edmonds made." Then it's okay. So it's sometimes.
These are people you have empowered to suggest things to you.
Several of them are writers from other places, and
right.
now it's
and
not
they're
everybody.
friends of yours,
and some are, some aren't.
but I mean, you might return the favor for them,
of course. But I'll get ideas from it. I guess would be what I said, which I think helps my broadcasting. So I'm kind of multitasking constantly during a game. So you can't multitask when you're having a conversation with one person. It just and I think people feel that in the workplace, no matter what it is. If you're being if you're just the next thing on their things to do list, and you're a little check mark, and you know it, it can be painful. It's really insulting, is what it is.
Although we don't mean to.
No, of course not.
Yeah, multitasking. So, of course, preaching is a multitasking activity. You know, sometimes you're preaching and the place is totally silent.
Yes.
And it's almost scary when you realize how much people are paying attention.
Yes, right.
And then you're another day, you just feel a restlessness, and you're just thinking to yourself, you're giving your sermon, you're thinking, I'm not communicating with these people right now.
Right.
I better stop this line and go to something else, or use that illustration that I thought I wouldn't use that's kind of scrawled in the margin, because my people are telling me that I'm not connecting with them right now.
So you're getting feedback on radio and TV.
Biologically. You see the bodies tell you. In radio and TV, you don't have that luxury.
You don't have it. Unless you, maybe Twitter, you get some, maybe more than you want, and maybe more direct than you want it. But it is a difference. But I would say that it made me think when you were saying that about a couple of times I had a chance to do chapel for both baseball and football players.
Yes.
I was the chaplain for both the Cardinals and the Rams for a short period of time.
And it's not identical. Baseball players are not identical football players.
So what I thought about, a couple of quick things on that. Football, when you do a football chapel, I did one for the Broncos when they were in town, and Dan Reeves had me do it. And Dan Reeves came up to me and said they did it on Saturday night before the Sunday game. And the football players, when they show up to chapel, they're focused. They're on a mission. You could see it. They're also very attentive, very appreciative.
But they're heavily coached.
They're heavily coached.
And they're used to that.
And they know that they're 1 minute late for a meeting, they're in trouble. Dan Reeves said, we're going to have chapel, son, from 7:10 to 7:30. And you can keep talking after 7:30, but we're leaving.
The room's empty. The room will be empty.
The room will be empty. So was I hitting 7:30, doing everything decent and good order that day. But the baseball guys, you do a chapel for baseball team, and the way baseball chapel works is you do the visiting team, the umpires, then the home team. So you've got.
Wait. Do you mean to tell me that umpires have souls?
Apparently, yes, they do. Well, they all have souls. I'm not sure how all of them are exercising, but it's interesting. You got a potential congregation of 4 people, and that doesn't mean they're all going to listen to you.
One or two.
And you're in their world. You're in their locker room, and it's just kind of a different.
I bet it is.
Different thing to do.
It's got to be one of the hardest jobs in the world.
It's very difficult. And
I was joking when I said.
Of course.
Umpires are bold men, and
think about
this. Tough.
Think about this. They're on the road all the time. They're never at home.
No home games.
So they are lonely guys too, and they love it when the chaplain comes in. And again, all these messages are planned for 15 minutes, but might be 5.
Yeah.
Because the manager just said we have a meeting with the pitchers so you have to adapt quickly.
Yeah,
so the baseball players, the difference is the football guys were locked in the night before a game. The baseball players, 10 minutes before the game, have a dip in, a cup of coffee, and their hat on backwards. And they're walking in and just kind of lounging. It's just such a different.
It is a more relaxed.
It's a much more relaxed game. I'll never forget. I did the Cleveland Indians chapel one day, and it's just kind of one of those cool experiences in baseball, traveling around. Of course, I've learned what I'm going to say, but. One of the players said, "Well, I'll introduce you, and we do prayer requests ourselves before you talk."
I'm guessing where this is going. You were left with 2 minutes left.
No, it's actually even different. I actually changed what I was going to say based on what happened.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm going to do prayer requests, and we're going to have Carlos do prayer requests." And because there were so many Latin players in there, they prayed for each other for a couple minutes in English and then in Spanish.
Yeah.
It's a silly thing to say this, but I remember thinking, God speaks Spanish, and then of course that's not really what I think, but it struck me in future endeavors that I realized that God speaks heart, and I believe that, and language is,
He speaks every language.
He understands the groanings that we don't even know what to say in prayer,
right.
and that's a great biblical principle. But I think that helps us understand when we are in what I would call non-church moments, where we think of prayer and all this stuff as being so how we would tie it to a church. I mean, there are times in the workplace where there's maybe an inaudible groan that we have, or somebody that we're working with that may be, groaning to God, or just there's a sense, I think, that the language goes beyond what we think the normal prayer language is.
Yeah, and I would imagine that most people who go to work who are believers have these moments where they don't have time to prepare for a meeting properly.
Yeah.
And they know there's going to be tension in the room.
Yeah.
And they just say, Lord, this meeting. That's about all they say verbally. And everything that's in their heart is, known to God, and maybe far better than they know it themselves.
So the training we talked about earlier helps us to be prepared to give an account of the hope that's within us, which is our biblical teaching admonition to do that. So the training helps us when those moments come up where we have to say the right word or have to seize an opportunity, we're ready for it. Just again, a quick story on that. I was on an airplane sitting next to a non-Christian friend of mine, and he worked in the truck. And he was reading about something. He says, "Well, you Christians think this. You Christian," and he said that several times.
Multiple times.
And that's kind of, I'm not. It doesn't bother me.
You're used to it. Right?
I'm used to it. It's not. It's clubhouse talk. It's okay. Mm-hmm. So and again, the context of our friendship.
Right.
So he said, "Well, you guys believe this. You guys believe this." So I literally said, on the plane, I said, "Okay, would you tell me what you think a Christian believes?" And this came from a Covenant Seminary paper that I had to write years ago. I took a class at Covenant about apologetics from Jerome Bars, trying to understand. You got to understand somebody else's worldview and their point of view before you can communicate to them. So I just said, look, you tell me what you think a Christian is, and everything he said is not what we would say. You people think you're better than me, but all that stuff.
Right.
So you're in the select club. I'm not, because you're better than me. And it's like, okay. And then after he said what he thought a Christian was, I didn't say anything. And it was maybe 5 or 10, and I was hoping he would ask me, okay, so what do you believe? Right. And he did. He eventually did ask me what I believe. And I said, well, I'll give you kind of a short version of this, but I got him a Bible. And he, within the next month, for the first time in his life, read the Gospel of John, and came back to me a month later, and he said, I can't say this on this podcast. Again, one of my filters at work here. He said,
colorful language.
He said, I got it. He says, I got it. He said, it's about expletive love, which those two words. He says, it's about love, isn't it? And with a strong adjective in front of it. And I said, yeah. And so that guy is a believer. He reads the Bible regularly. He's just a delight to be around. But that's the being prepared to give an account. It's not just about evangelism. It's about, where is this guy right now? He was kind of trying to make a point with me.
Well, he was poking you because he had been spiritually nudged by God.
Yeah, of course.
So for what it's worth, when I get a non-Christian in my life in a serious way, by which I mean I'm going to see this person over and over and over again. And I have some sense that, they know I'm a pastor, professor, and my goal is always to just start reading the Bible with them.
Yeah.
And if they don't have a Bible, I try to get them a study Bible, because, somebody with a lot of objections and they've never read the Bible, they don't know what to make of things because of, the 2,000-year-old document.
Right.
And if you just take your time, and the first 4 books I ask them to read are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe, then Romans and Genesis and Psalms and so forth. And if they stick with it, it's almost every time they eventually come to faith. I can tell you about one person. I can think of one person who studied the Bible with me at length. We're going to read and we're going to talk. We're going to read, we'll have lunch.
Yeah.
Or go for a walk, whatever.
Yeah.
Who did not eventually become a Christian.
Yeah.
The word of God is potent.
There's no question. And that's really the story of the genesis of faith in my life is having a teammate give me a Bible when I was making fun of the guys who were going to chapel. I was one of the few guys on my team that wouldn't go, and these guys loved me anyway. And I think maybe that is as good of a workplace, in my view, one is as good of a workplace. Principle is even when somebody is not on your, they're not with you, you can love them anyway. And they loved me anyway. They really did. They gave me a Bible, and one of the guys had been a football player and baseball player at Stanford. And I had an engineering background from Virginia, so I thought I was smarter than these guys that were doing this faith thing.
But Stanford's even better than Virginia.
But Stanford is, it's at least close. It's at least
see what I can get out
it's
of
where
you.
the people that don't get into Virginia go, is what I like to say.
I think that's not really. We could have a debate about that.
I think we certainly could. But I respected him in a different way, and he had the voice for me, gave me the Bible, and I saw, just by reading God's Word, this is not just a normal book. This is clearly Him speaking to me. So that I agree 100% with what you said, and especially in a day where opinions are, everybody's got one.
Yeah.
And
what I love to tell people is, hey, you know what? You can read the Gospel of Mark in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not even as long as a TV show.
But you have to come to essentially understand that I'm now listening to the opinion and the word of the Creator of the universe, as opposed to the opinion of somebody on social media or on a news station. And that's the difference to me, because people are so inundated with opinions.
Right.
But what's the basis for them having that opinion? And of course, if you're the Creator of the universe, I think you have, of course, you have to accept that, understand it, and believe it. But I think that's the difference.
Yeah. So I think you and I both agree that we almost would rather have an antagonist than somebody who says, hey, how you doing? And let's talk about vacation. But I also, I know we agree on this, even if somebody has no idea that the Bible is the Word of God, when they open up the Gospels, they can tell there's something very different here.
It's transforming. I mean, I think it was that way with me. I still remember. I always jokingly say, when I first read the Bible, and I did do this. I came to different things, and I read, wow, Jesus talking about the house divided. We're talking about the evil spirits. A house divided itself, and I thought, well, this book quotes Abraham Lincoln. This must be a real good book.
That's so hilarious.
That's my joke. But I did the thing that really was true to me is when I saw the verse in 1 Corinthians that the wisdom of the world is foolishness in God's sight, because I thought I was smarter than people. And it was very...
and you are smart.
Well, yes, but I needed to be humbled by the fact that I didn't know as much as I thought I did.
Well, of course, one of our great challenges is that we overemphasize or overestimate our strengths.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. And
well,
that's good.
Let's switch to something a little bit different. I'll just mention two things, but I want to... Rick's first hit in Major League Baseball was against Nolan Ryan. It was not a changeup. It was a 96-mile-an-hour fastball. But my favorite stat, looking up your life story on the baseballreference.com, is that one year you were such a fearsome hitter that you came to the plate 25 times and walked 5 of them.
How about that?
Which is just an amazing stat. They must have been terrified.
I think they knew I got the hit off of Ryan. That's probably part of it. But and I'd like to say was